Hi, this is Miss Ruggieri here for another great KFC book. This one is a classic. It's been around for a very, very long time. I can remember reading this when I was in third grade, and I absolutely loved this picture of the cat meowing. It's a great, great book about a cricket and his little friends, Cat and the Mouse, in New York City. And it is a Newbery Honor book, and that just means that Newbery Medal is an honor, a medal given to really great stories each year. And this one was an honor book, which was kind of like a runner-up or second or third place. So whatever year this medaled, it didn't make the medal, but it made runner-up. And so I'm going to read the first chapter. It will be in our KFC section in the library. When you come into the library and start turning the corner to the genre section, there is a spot where we call it the KFC spot, and it will be located there. The Cricket in Times Square was written by George Selden. And the chapters are not that long, so I like that. And the action moves pretty good. Chapter 1 is called Tucker. Tucker. A mouse was looking at Mario. The mouse's name was, you got it, Tucker. And he was sitting in the opening of an abandoned drain pipe in the subway station at Times Square. The drain pipe was his home. Back a few feet in the wall, it opened out into a pocket that Tucker had filled with bits of paper and shreds of cloth he collected. And when he wasn't collecting, scrounging as he called it, or sleeping, he liked to sit at the opening of the drain pipe and watch the world go by, at least as much of the world as hurried through the Times Square subway station. Tucker finished the last few crumbs of a cookie he was eating, a Lorna Doone shortbread he had found earlier in the evening, and licked off his whiskers. Such a pity, he sighed. Every Saturday night now, for almost a year, he had watched Mario tending his father's newsstand. Now, if you don't know what a newsstand is, in New York City, they're famous for them. It's where it's a stand, kind of like a lemonade stand, but a stand, and they sell newspapers and magazines and maps and sometimes candies and sodas and stuff like that. So Mario works at his father's newsstand. On weekdays, of course, the boy had to get to bed early, but over the weekends, Papa Bellini let him take his part in helping out with the family business. Far into the night, Mario waited. Papa hoped that by staying open as late as possible, his newsstand might get some of the business that would otherwise have gone to the larger stands. But there wasn't much business tonight. The poor kid might as well go home, murmured Tucker Mouse to himself. He looked around the station. The bustle of the day had long since subsided, and even the nighttime crowds returning from the theaters and movies had vanished. Now and then a person or two would come down one of the many stairs that led from the street and dart through the station. But at this hour, everyone was in a hurry to get to bed. On the lower level, the trains were running much less often. There would be a long stretch of silence, then the mounting roar of a string of cars approached Times Square, then a pause while it let off old passengers and took on new ones, and finally the rush of sound as it disappeared up the dark tunnel. And the hush fell again. There was an emptiness in the air. The whole station seemed to be waiting for the crowds of people that it needed. Tucker Mouse looked back at Mario. He was sitting on a three-legged stool behind the counter of the newsstand. In front of him, all the magazines and newspapers were displayed as neatly as he knew how to make them. Papa Bellini had made the newsstand himself many years ago, so he must have built it himself. The space inside was big enough for Mario, but Mama and Papa were camped when they each took their own turn. A shelf ran along one side, and on it was a little secondhand radio, a box of Kleenex for Mama's hay fever, a cash register, and some matches for Papa's pipe, and an alarm clock for no good reason at all. The cash register had one drawer, which was always open. It had gotten stuck once with all the money the Bellinis had in the world inside of it, so Papa decided it would be safer never to shut it again. When the stand was closed for the night, the money there that was left there to start off the new day was perfectly safe because Papa had also made a big wooden cover with a lock that fitted over the whole thing. Now, back then, this probably was safe enough. Today, not so sure. Mario had been listening to the radio. He switched it off. Way down the tracks, he could see the lights of the shuttle train coming toward him. On the level of the station where the newsstand was, the only tracks were the ones on which the shuttle ran. That was a short train that went back and forth from Times Square to Grand Central, taking people from the subways on the west side of New York City over to the lines on the east. Mario knew most of the conductors and on the shuttle. They all liked him and they came over to talk between their trips. The train screeched to a stop beside the newsstand, blowing a gust of hot air in front of it. Only 9 or 10 people got out. Tucker watched anxiously to see if any of them stopped to buy a newspaper. "All late papers!" shouted Mario as they hurried by. "Magazines!" And there he is, calling out to get the people's attentions. Like, "Newspapers for sale! Come get your magazines!" It's kind of how they used to do advertising back then. But no one stopped. Hardly anyone even looked at him. Mario sank back on his stool. All evening long, he had sold only 15 papers and 4 magazines. In the drain pipe, Tucker Mouse, who had been keeping count too, sighed and scratched his ear. Mario's friend Paul, a conductor on the shuttle, came over to the stand. "Any luck?" he asked. "No," said Mario. "Maybe the next train." "There's going to be less and less until morning," he said. Mario rested his chin on the palm of his hand. "I can't understand it," he said. "It's Saturday night, too. Even the Sunday papers aren't selling." Paul leaned up against the newsstand. "You're up awfully late tonight," he said. "Well, I can sleep on Sundays," said Mario. "Besides, school's out now. Mama and Papa are picking me up on the way home. They went to visit some friends. Saturday's the only chance they have." Over a loudspeaker came a voice saying, "Next train for Grand Central, track 2. Next train for Grand Central, track 2. "Night, Mario," Paul said. He started off toward the shuttle. Then he stopped, reached in his pocket, and flipped a $50 over the counter. Mario caught the big coin. "I'll take the Sunday Times," Paul said, and picked up the newspaper. "Hey, wait," Mario called after him. "It's only 25 cents. You got a quarter coming." So back then, newspapers were 25 cents. If he only sold 14 newspapers, how much money is that? It's not a lot. But Paul was already in the car. The door had slid closed. He smiled and waved through the window. With a lurch, the train moved off, its lights glimmering away through the darkness. Tucker Mouse smiled too. He liked Paul. In fact, he liked anybody who was nice to Mario. But it was late now. Time to crawl back into his comfortable niche in the wall and go to sleep. Do you know what a niche is? It's spelled Niche. You can use those context clues around what I just read to figure out kind of what a niche is. Let me read it again. But it was late now. Time to crawl back to his comfortable niche in the wall and go to sleep. Even a mouse who lives in the subway station in Times Square has to sleep sometimes. And Tucker had a big day planned for tomorrow, collecting things for his home and snapping up bits of food that fell from the lunch counters all over the station. He was just about to turn into the drain pipe when he heard a very, strange sound. Now, Tucker Mouse had heard almost all the sounds that could ever be heard in New York City. He had heard the rumble of the subway trains and the shriek of the iron wheels that they make when they go around the corner. From above, through the iron grills that open into the streets, he heard the thrumming of the rubber tires of cars and the hooting of horns and the howling of the brakes. And he heard the babble of voices when the station was full of human beings, and the barking of the dogs that some people had on their leashes. He heard the birds and the pigeons of New York and the cats and even the high purring of airplanes above the city Tucker had heard. But in all his days and on all his journeys through the greatest city in the world, Tucker had never heard a sound quite like this. So I wonder what sound it is that Tucker actually heard. So check this book out. It's in the KFC section of our library, and find out what that sound is that Tucker the Mouse heard.